A vast city once bloomed in the heart of a desert. Its survival depended on a hidden science of water, a mastery lost for centuries. Today, as our own reservoirs run low, that ancient wisdom holds the key to our future. By the end of this journey, you will understand the forgotten engineering principles that can still transform how we live with water. How did Romans move rivers across mountains without a single pump? Why did Maya kings build temples that were also sophisticated water filters? We will uncover the sophisticated blueprints that turned wastelands into empires. What does it truly mean for a civilization to be advanced? That Persian farmer's tunnel was more than a feat of endurance. It was a blueprint for civilization. Wherever the Qanat system took root, society itself was reshaped around its quiet, dependable flow. The technology created a unique form of communal life, one built on cooperation rather than conflict over a scarce resource. Because a single Qanat could take years, even generations, to complete, its construction demanded a long-term commitment from an entire community. This was not a project for a lone individual or a single family. It required surveyors, diggers, engineers, and financiers all working toward a shared future. The water that eventually emerged from the ground was not owned by one person. It was allocated through a meticulously fair system of timeshares, where families received the right to use the flow for specific periods, measured by water clocks or sundials. This created a profound social contract. Your wealth and status were tied not to hoarding water, but to your assigned time slot within the collective system. Disputes were settled by local water judges, and maintenance was a shared duty passed down through families. The Qanat, therefore, did more than irrigate fields. It irrigated a culture of shared responsibility. It turned the unpredictable desert into a place of scheduled certainty, where you knew precisely when your water would arrive. This engineered harmony stands in stark contrast to how many modern cities manage water, often as a commodified resource prone to scarcity and conflict. The ancient lesson is clear. The most resilient water systems are those that bind people together, making the health of the community inseparable from the health of the source. But while the Qanat nurtured community from below, another civilization was mastering water from above. The Roman aqueduct was a declaration carved in stone, a statement that nature's obstacles were merely invitations to build. Picture the engineer on a distant hillside, sighting along a simple wooden frame called a chorobates. This was his most critical tool, a water level that allowed him to calculate a slope so gentle it defies belief. For the water to flow by gravity alone across 50, even 100 kilometers, the channel had to drop only a few centimeters for every kilometer of length. A single miscalculation, a slope too steep or too shallow, and the entire monumental effort would fail. This was engineering as a high-wire act, performed across valleys and through mountains. They used concrete that could harden underwater, allowing them to build foundations in rivers. For deep depressions, they employed inverted siphons, lead pipes that used water pressure to push the flow down into a valley and back up the other side, a concept of stunning sophistication. The result was a torrent of liquid order. At its peak, the system fed ancient Rome with over 1 million gallons of water every single day. The water commissioner, a man named Frontinus, saw this not as mere plumbing, but as the soul of the empire. He wrote that the careful management of the water supply was the most telling proof of Roman greatness, and he was right. This water did not simply quench thirst. It built a new kind of society. It fed vast public baths that were centers of culture and conversation. It supplied countless fountains, turning city squares into communal gathering spots. It powered mills, flushed public latrines, and supplied the homes of the elite. the aqueduct made urban life on a massive scale not just possible but luxurious. The Pont du Gard in France stands today not as a crumbling ruin, but as a lesson in harmony. Its 3 tiers of arches are so perfectly proportioned they seem to grow from the cliff itself, a marriage of brute strength and breathtaking beauty. It tells us that for the Romans, infrastructure was not hidden away. It was celebratory, a monument to human will. They managed this colossal, city-wide utility without a single electric pump or computer model. Their tools were gravity, observation, and an unwavering institutional will to build for the public good. When the empire finally faded, this knowledge faded with it, and Europe would not see its like again for over 1,000 years. The aqueduct shows us a different path to resilience, one of centralized mastery and monumental confidence. But what happens when an entire civilization is built not on moving water, but on catching every single drop? While Roman engineers conquered distance, the Maya faced a different kind of water puzzle. In the heart of the Guatemalan rainforest, the great city of Tikal did not struggle to find water, but to hold onto it. For months, torrential rains would flood the land, only to be followed by a dry season that could parch the earth. Survival here demanded a genius for capture and purification, turning the chaotic deluge into a lifeline. The Maya solution was a profound fusion of science, politics, and sacred belief. Archaeologist Lisa Lucero notes that water was central to Maya kingship. Controlling it was both a divine right and the most practical necessity for survival. The king was not just a ruler, he was the guarantor of the rainy season, the keeper of the life-giving reservoirs. This sacred duty was built directly into the city's stone. The very temples that reached for the gods were designed as giant water catchment systems. Their steep, plaster-covered surfaces funneled rainfall through ornate stone gutters and channels into vast, sealed reservoirs at their bases. A downpour on the temple plaza was not a nuisance, it was a ceremonial event, a literal blessing from the heavens being gathered and stored by the king's divine architecture. But gathering water was only the first step. In a crowded city, keeping that water clean for drinking was an immense challenge. Recent discoveries show the Maya solved this with a natural filtration technology we are only now beginning to appreciate. They lined their reservoirs with zeolite sand, a volcanic mineral that acts as a molecular sieve, trapping bacteria and impurities. This was not a haphazard choice. It was a deliberate, sophisticated application of material science, providing clean water to a population that at times reached tens of thousands. The entire urban landscape was an engineered hydrological machine. Canals directed runoff, causeways managed flow, and residential groups had their own smaller-scale systems. Yet this machine was also a map of the cosmos. Water bodies were seen as portals to the underworld, a realm of ancestors and deities. The careful placement of reservoirs and canals often mirrored celestial patterns and sacred geography. Engineering was not separate from spirituality, it was an expression of it. To manage water was to commune with the gods, to maintain the balance of the world. This intertwining created a resilient system that supported flourishing cities for centuries. It challenges our modern separation of utility and meaning. What happens when a civilization views its infrastructure as part of a living, spiritual landscape? For the Maya, it meant that the failure of the reservoirs was not just a technical problem, it was a spiritual crisis, a sign the king had lost the favor of the gods. When prolonged drought eventually strained these systems beyond their limits, it shook the very foundation of their political and cosmic order. Their legacy asks us a difficult question. Could our own water systems be more resilient if they were not just pipes and pumps, but were woven back into our cultural and ecological understanding of the world? The Maya saw water as a sacred dialogue with the cosmos, but on the arid plains of India, another civilization engaged in a different kind of conversation with the sky. They built not upward toward the heavens, but deep into the welcoming earth, creating structures that were breathtaking feats of architecture, community, and profound hydrological intelligence. These were the stepwells known as bayolis or valves, and to descend into one is to enter a different world entirely. Take Chand Bayori in Rajasthan, a place of staggering geometry and quiet power. Here, over 3,500 perfectly symmetrical steps descend 13 stories down, forming a vast, inverted pyramid of stone that seems to pull you into the earth's cool embrace. This is not a hole in the ground, it is a palace for water. A stepwell was a masterclass in environmental adaptation, a machine for harvesting the monsoon. Its wide, stepped walls were designed to capture every possible drop of rainfall, channeling it efficiently into the deep central reservoir. The staggering depth served multiple purposes. It allowed communities to access water as the level gradually receded during the long, punishing dry season, with steps providing a stable pathway down to the ever-lowering waterline. Crucially, that depth also helped replenish the groundwater aquifer beneath it, acting as a giant recharge point for the region's invisible water table, while protecting the precious liquid from the evaporating sun and wind. As architectural historian Mona Livingston observed, the stepwell is a building that is also a landscape, engineered to create a microclimate several degrees cooler than the surface. This was climate control carved from stone, but the genius of the stepwell lies in what it built above the waterline. This was never just a utilitarian tank. The walls are adorned with exquisite carvings of deities and mythological scenes. Elaborate pavilions and shaded colonnades were built at various levels, creating stages for community life. Pilgrims, traders, and local women gathering water would find rest and respite here from the blistering heat. The space echoed with conversation and ceremony, a cool, subterranean town square. Rituals and festivals were held on its steps, weaving the practical act of drawing water into the spiritual and social fabric of daily life. The structure did not hide its function, it celebrated it, transforming the essential chore of survival into an experience of beauty and community. This represents a holistic vision of resource management that feels almost foreign today. The stepwell was a single, integrated answer to multiple needs: water security, climate refuge, social space, and spiritual expression. It asked the landscape a question and received an answer in the form of breathtaking architecture. Its silent, stone-lined vaults now pose a question to us. How can modern infrastructure, so often hidden in pipes or behind fences, learn to serve multiple, deeply human purposes once more? The stepwell reminds us that the most enduring systems are those that nourish the community and the spirit as effectively as they conserve a physical resource. They show that resilience is not just about engineering, but about creating a place where people want to gather, to linger, and to care for the source that sustains them. The stepwells of India celebrated water within a carved and communal space, but one empire chose a different canvas for its hydraulic ambition: the entire landscape itself. In the dense jungles of Cambodia, the Khmer Empire did not just build a city, they engineered an ecosystem. From the sky, the iconic spires of Angkor Wat are merely the crown jewels of a far grander design, a vast, sprawling metropolis woven from water. This was Angkor, a hydraulic city on a scale the world had never seen, where temples rose from a meticulously managed grid of canals, moats, and colossal reservoirs called barrays. The challenge was the Mekong monsoon, a cycle of deluge and drought that could either nourish or destroy. The Khmer response was to turn the entire region into a machine for capturing, storing, and redistributing that volatile gift. They transformed seasonal flooding from a threat into their greatest asset. Researcher Roland Fletcher, using advanced LiDAR technology that sees through the forest canopy, has revealed the true extent of this achievement. Angkor was not a dense, compact urban center like Rome. but a dispersed, low-density city uniquely shaped by its water network. Canals functioned as roads connecting temple complexes and residential districts, while also serving as irrigation channels for the vast rice paddies that fed the empire. At the heart of this system were the barrays, monumental feats of earth and will. The West Barray, an artificial reservoir 8 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, remains one of the largest pre-industrial engineering projects ever undertaken. Imagine a body of water so vast it required earthen dams taller than a person and sophisticated spillways to control its flow. This was not a passive lake, it was a regulated battery, storing monsoon rains to provide a steady supply of water through the long dry season. This hydraulic grid did more than prevent famine. It created abundance. It supported a form of rice agriculture so productive it could sustain a population approaching 1 million people, fueling the empire's artistic, military, and architectural zenith for centuries. The system provided transportation, possibly even moderated the local climate through evaporation, and held profound religious significance, mirroring the Hindu cosmos with its sacred Mount Meru surrounded by cosmic oceans. The moats around Angkor Wat were not just for defense, they were symbolic of this celestial order. Yet, the very grandeur of this system contained the seeds of its vulnerability. Such a complex, interconnected network demanded constant, meticulous maintenance. Canals needed dredging, spillways required repair, and the delicate balance of the grid had to be preserved. Evidence suggests that toward the later centuries of the empire, the region was struck by a series of extreme climate shifts, including prolonged droughts followed by intense monsoon rains. A system designed for a certain rhythm of nature was suddenly stressed beyond its capacity. The meticulously managed canals may have silted up, the barrays could have overflowed or drained too quickly, and the agricultural foundation began to falter. The lesson of Angkor is not one of simple collapse, but of a brilliant system meeting conditions it was not designed to withstand. It offers a profound cautionary tale about the limits of engineering, no matter how advanced. The most resilient water systems are not just massive, they are adaptable, able to respond to a changing environment. Angkor's legacy asks us a direct and urgent question. As our own climate shifts in unpredictable ways, are our modern, centralized water systems, for all their technological prowess, any more adaptable than those ancient, earth-carved reservoirs? The silence of those stone temples suggests that longevity depends not on conquering nature, but on learning to dance with its ever-changing rhythms. Perhaps the most profound water maps were never meant to be read by human eyes at all. High above the Peruvian desert, the vast shapes of the Nazca lines stretch across the plateau, a gallery of geometric forms and animal figures visible only from the sky. For decades, their purpose was a beautiful mystery, interpreted as an astronomical calendar or a pathway for deities. But a compelling new theory asks us to look past the spider and the monkey, to see the entire landscape as a desperate, ingenious text. What if these lines were not a message to the gods, but a detailed survival manual for finding water in one of the driest places on Earth? Researcher David Johnson proposed a radical idea. He suggests the famous geoglyphs are aligned with subterranean water flows, marking the location of fault lines where aquifers come closer to the surface. The sprawling trapezoids and long, straight lines may have acted as a giant map, pointing toward life-giving sources hidden deep below the parched ground. This theory transforms the desert floor from a ritual canvas into a form of sacred, practical cartography. The most convincing evidence might be the spirals. Scattered across the Nazca region are curious funnel-shaped depressions known as puquios. These are not just holes, they are sophisticated helical wind vents, connected to underground filtration galleries that snake toward the mountains. The design is a masterpiece of passive engineering. As wind blows across the desert surface, it is funneled down the spiral opening, creating a difference in atmospheric pressure that literally pulls groundwater up through the underground tunnels and into the irrigation system. It is a Qanat perfected with an elegant wind-powered pump. This technology would have allowed the Nazca to not just survive, but to farm the desert for centuries, sustaining a complex society against impossible odds. The implication is staggering. The giant glyphs we marvel at today may have been the symbolic key to operating this hidden hydraulic network, a ritual representation of a life support system. The lines connected the people to the water and the water to the cosmos in one continuous cycle of meaning and survival. While debated, this interpretation forces a fundamental shift in perspective. It asks us to see ancient monuments not as separate from utility, but as deeply integrated systems. The art was the map, the ritual was the maintenance manual. The spiritual and the practical were the same language written across the land itself. The Nazca did not build temples to water gods, they inscribed the entire territory as a temple, with its liturgy being the act of finding and preserving the source of life. How does a society encode such critical knowledge into its very geography? They make the knowledge inseparable from their identity, their art, and their understanding of the world. The lines challenge our modern compartmentalization, where infrastructure is hidden and art is placed in galleries. For the Nazca, the infrastructure was the art, and its beauty was a direct reflection of its life-giving function. This deep integration of symbol and survival represents perhaps the ultimate sophistication in ancient water science, a reminder that the most resilient systems are those that are cherished, ritualized, and understood as sacred. The silent maps of the Nazca reveal a world where water and symbol were one, but this fusion of the practical and the profound was not unique. In fact, it was a universal language of power. To control water was to demonstrate a sacred right to rule, and ancient leaders built this truth into the very stones of their palaces. On the island of Crete, the labyrinthine palace of Knossos held a secret more startling than any myth. Here, over 3,500 years ago, a complex system of terracotta pipes channeled fresh water and carried waste away, featuring the world's first known flushing toilets. Yet this advanced plumbing was not concealed within the walls like a modern utility. It was displayed, integrated into the architecture of power. A queen would have her own luxurious bath, its brightly painted walls a testament to a civilization that saw the mastery of water as a core expression of sophistication and control. The ruler of Knossos did not just provide water, he performed his dominion over nature's most vital and chaotic element, turning a basic human need into a spectacle of civilized order. This performance was a global script. Along the Nile, the pharaoh's divine authority was renewed not in battle, but with a ceremonial shovel. During the said festival, a ritual meant to rejuvenate the king's strength after decades of rule, he would perform the symbolic act of digging a canal. This was no empty gesture. It directly reaffirmed his cosmic role as the guarantor of the annual inundation, the lifeblood of Egypt itself. His power was literally measured by the fertility of the river he claimed to command. Failure of the floods was not a natural disaster, it was a political and theological crisis, a sign the king had lost favor with the gods. The hydraulic state and the divine state were inseparable. Half a world away in ancient China, engineering an answer to nature's violence became the ultimate proof of virtuous leadership. For centuries, the Min River wreaked havoc, flooding the fertile Sichuan basin with devastating regularity. Then, in the 3rd century before the Common Era, a governor named Lai Bing embarked on a project that would redefine the relationship between people and water. The Duzhongyan system was a masterpiece of elegant engineering, using a long spillway to divide the river, a cut channel to drain excess water, and a narrow opening to regulate flow, all without a single dam. But its purpose was greater than flood control. It was built as a physical demonstration of the mandate of heaven. the idea that a ruler's legitimacy came from his ability to maintain harmony between human society and the natural world. By taming the destructive river and creating perennial abundance, Lai Bing proved his wisdom and his right to govern. The system did not conquer the Min River, it collaborated with it, a philosophy etched into the landscape that still irrigates farmland for millions today. In every case, the water system was a dual instrument. It was undeniably practical, ensuring survival and enabling growth, but it was also powerfully performative, a permanent, functioning monument to the ideology that built it. The infrastructure legitimized the ruler by providing tangible proof of his ability to harness elemental forces for the public good. This created a powerful social contract, one written in canals and reservoirs. The people received security and abundance, and in return they acknowledged the authority that made it possible. This integration required a specific, holistic kind of knowledge. The engineer was also a priest, the surveyor understood cosmology, and the king's architect had to weave together hydrology, politics, and sacred geometry into a single, enduring form. This ancient duality forces a difficult reflection. Our modern water systems are marvels of hidden efficiency, a network of anonymous pipes and treatment plants. But in divorcing the functional entirely from the symbolic, have we lost something vital? When a community no longer sees, understands, or feels a connection to the source of its water, that resource can become abstract, just another commodity. The ancient approach suggests that the most resilient and cared for public works are those that resonate on a cultural level, that tell a story about who we are and our place in the world. They remind us that true sustainability may depend not just on the science in the pipes, but on the meaning we attach to the water that flows from them. That sacred contract between knowledge and power contained a hidden fragility. The master Qanat digger, known as the Mukani, carried a map of the aquifer not on parchment but in his mind. For years he apprenticed with a master, learning to judge soil composition by its taste, to listen for the sound of distant water through a stone, and to calculate the precise, gentle slope needed over kilometers, all through oral tradition and lived experience. He was a living library, and his death without a successor could erase centuries of accumulated wisdom as completely as a fire consuming a manuscript. This was the paradox of ancient hydro-technical genius. It was often profoundly local, esoteric, and transmitted through fragile human chains. Guilds and priestly classes, like the Maya hydrological engineers, guarded their methods as sacred secrets, a source of both status and societal stability. They rarely wrote down comprehensive manuals, believing the knowledge was too vital, too connected to ritual and intuition, to be captured fully in symbols. This made the systems magnificently adapted to their place, but terrifyingly vulnerable to the passage of time. When the Roman Empire's centralized administration crumbled, it wasn't just the legions that disbanded. The entire technical corps, the commissioners, the surveyors, the specialists who knew the secret of underwater concrete and how to maintain a gradient of 1 in 200, faded into history. The aqueducts didn't fail overnight. They silted up, their channels cracked, and the knowledge to repair them simply evaporated within a few generations. Europe entered a long period where the very concept of large-scale public waterworks became a half-remembered legend. A similar silence followed the Maya collapse. The intricate understanding of zeolite filtration, the ceremonial maintenance of reservoir linings, the precise celestial timing for canal cleaning, all this perished with the elite priesthood and the social order that supported them. The loss was catastrophic in its completeness. It wasn't merely a set of instructions that was forgotten. It was an entire systemic intelligence, a deep, place-based understanding of how water moved through a specific landscape, how it interacted with local soils and seasonal rains, and how human society could dance within those rhythms. This knowledge had been built over centuries through observation and adaptation, and it vanished in a historical blink. The ruins left behind were not just of cities, but of a relationship with the natural world. This historical warning echoes into our present. Our own water knowledge is monumental, encoded in digital models and engineering textbooks, but is it any less fragile? Our systems are incredibly centralized, dependent on a small cadre of experts and vast, complex supply chains. The technical schematics for a modern dam or a wastewater treatment plant are documented, yes, but if the societal structure that interprets and maintains them were to fracture, how long would that knowledge remain actionable? We might leave behind concrete shells and metal pipes, but the living intelligence behind them, the institutional memory of why a valve is placed here or a sensor there, could be as lost to future generations as the Mukani's sense of the underground stream. The ancient world teaches us that resilience is not just about building robust infrastructure, but about building robust knowledge, widely shared and deeply rooted in the community it serves. It asks us a haunting question. What are we doing today to ensure that our own hydrological wisdom does not become another silent, indecipherable glyph on the landscape of the future? The ancient engineer's toolkit held no switches or motors, only a profound respect for an invisible force. Gravity was not just a fact of nature, it was the silent architect of empires, the only power source they needed to build civilizations. To harness it required a deep, intuitive science of passive flow, a set of principles so elegant they feel almost like magic to our energy-hungry modern minds. Consider the simple act of getting water from a mountain spring to a distant city, or evenly across a vast terraced field. The solution was a masterpiece of geometry and patience. It began with the surveyor's chorobates, that long water level, establishing a gradient so slight it was nearly imperceptible. A slope of just 1 part in 200, a drop of only a few centimeters for every meter of forward travel, was often enough. This gentle decline was the golden rule. Too steep, and the water would rush with destructive force, eroding the channel walls. Too shallow, and it would stagnate, inviting sediment and disease. The entire network, whether Roman lead pipe or Inca stone canal, was a carefully balanced equation where distance, slope, and channel shape were in constant conversation. They mastered the principle of communicating vessels, understanding that water seeks its own level, and used this to create networks that could branch and distribute flow without a single pump. They even grasped concepts we give modern names to, like the Venturi effect. By subtly narrowing a section of channel, they could increase the water's velocity to prevent settling, then widen it again to reduce pressure, a clever manipulation of fluid dynamics using nothing but carved stone. And before that clean, fast-moving water entered the delicate distribution pipes of a city, it would first pass through a series of settling tanks. Here, the flow would slow, allowing sand and silt to fall out of suspension, a pre-treatment system that protected the entire network from clogging. The Inca exemplify this empirical genius. Their canals, traversing impossible Andean landscapes, maintain such a miraculously consistent slope over kilometers that water still flows through many of them today. They built these not from abstract formulas, but from generations of observation, a trial and error developed physics written directly into the mountainside. This represents a pinnacle of sustainable design. Their systems had no operating costs, no fuel, and no moving parts to break. They worked because they collaborated seamlessly with the fundamental laws of the physical world. Our modern water infrastructure, by contrast, is a story of constant intervention. We spend immense energy to pump water against gravity, to treat it with complex chemicals, and to force it through pipes at pressures nature never intended. The ancient approach asks us a quiet but profound question. In our pursuit of total control, have we forgotten the power of elegant simplicity? Their legacy suggests that the most resilient systems are often the quietest, the ones that do not fight the landscape but listen to it, using gravity's endless, free work to achieve with subtlety what we often strain to accomplish with force. This principle of working with natural forces did not end at distribution. It began at the very source, guiding the most critical decision of all, where to find the water in the first place. Finding that hidden water required a science of subtle signs. Long before modern drilling rigs, ancient hydrologists read the landscape like a living map, their tools not instruments, but a lifetime of accumulated observation. They understood that water underground whispers its presence to the surface world if you know how to listen. A certain cluster of reeds in an otherwise dry valley, a particular type of willow thriving where no stream was visible, these were not accidents. They were direct indicators of a high water table, a signature written in roots, the flight patterns of certain insects at dusk, or the behavior of animals heading to a specific spot, were all part of the data. This was a profound ecological literacy, a form of hydrogeology born from generations of watching and learning. The master builders of the Qanat did not simply start digging anywhere. They would travel to the distant foothills, tracking the faintest seasonal streams after a rain, observing where the greenest vegetation persisted longest into the dry season. These were the clues to an aquifer's recharge zone, the area where water from mountain rainfall slowly seeped into the ground, beginning its long subterranean journey. Pinpointing this source was everything. The entire miles-long tunnel, the lifeline of a community, depended on that initial, perfect reading of the land's hidden anatomy. In the brutally arid Negev desert, the Nabatean farmers took this principle of observation to an even finer scale. They became experts in capturing water that most of us would never even see. They built low stone walls in precise patterns across the desert floor, creating tiny barriers that would capture the scant overnight dew, channeling the microscopic droplets toward the roots of a single precious tree. They laid out fields of small stone mounds to condense fog from the air. Every rare rainstorm was not just welcomed, it was meticulously managed by a network of stone channels and cisterns that directed every possible drop into the ground, actively recharging the very aquifer they depended on. This was not extraction, it was a form of cultivation. They were farming the water itself, nurturing the source with as much care as the crops it would eventually grow. This mindset created a fundamentally different relationship with groundwater. They saw it not as a limitless reservoir to be pumped, but as a fragile, living bank account. You could only withdraw what you knew was being deposited. The Qanat enforced this sustainability by its very design. It was a gentle siphon tapping the top of the water table and allowing gravity to do the work. This slow, steady draw prevented the rapid depletion and saltwater intrusion that plague modern high-speed wells. The system was self-regulating. If the water table fell, the Qanat's flow simply diminished, giving the aquifer time to recover. It was a built-in feedback loop that demanded patience and respect. This holistic view is perhaps the most vital lesson they leave us. Ancient water managers did not see a river, an aquifer, and the rain as separate things. They saw one continuous cycling system. The health of the mountain recharge zone directly determined the flow from the spring miles away. The dew captured on a desert stone was part of the same story as the water in the deep well. Their success was rooted in this interconnected vision, our understanding we are now desperately trying to rebuild with satellites and sensors, having lost the intimate, ground-level literacy they possessed. It makes you wonder, with all our advanced technology, have we become less fluent in the basic language of the earth? Their legacy is a challenge to look past the pipe and the pump, to see the entire watershed as a single, sacred source. This reverence extended even to the very materials they chose to channel this precious resource, moving from the science of finding water to the art of conveying it. The science of finding water was matched by the artistry of carrying it, To touch the lining of a Roman aqueduct channel is to feel a material that defies time, a concrete known as opus signinum. This was no ordinary mix. Roman engineers perfected a recipe using volcanic ash from the region of Pozzuoli, a substance we now call pozzolana. When mixed with lime and rubble, this ash created a chemical marvel, a hydraulic concrete that could not only set underwater but actually grew harder and more cohesive as centuries passed. Seawater, rather than eroding it, triggered long-term reactions that formed new crystalline structures, essentially allowing the material to strengthen with age. This was material science of the highest order, born from careful observation of local geology and generations of practical experimentation. They were not just builders, they were alchemists of durability, turning the very earth beneath their feet into a permanent testament to their vision. This localized genius was a global phenomenon. In the Maya lowlands, engineers developed a nearly impermeable lime plaster for their sacred reservoirs, a blend so effective it kept precious water from seeping back into the porous limestone bedrock. Along the Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamian builders used bitumen, a natural tar, to seal the beds of their vast canals against leaks. In ancient Sri Lanka, the sophisticated irrigation systems relied on expertly crafted terracotta pipes, designed with cleverly jointed sections that could accommodate subtle ground movement without shattering. Each solution was a direct conversation with the local environment, a tailored answer to a specific set of challenges posed by soil, climate, and available resources. Perhaps the most astonishing property researchers are now uncovering in some ancient concretes is a form of self-healing. Microscopic analysis suggests that inclusions of unreacted lime within the Roman mix could later dissolve when water seeped into a hairline crack, then recrystallized to fill the gap, a built-in repair mechanism operating on a timescale of decades or centuries. Modern material scientists are actively trying to decode and replicate this passive intelligence. This ancient approach to materials carries a profound lesson about resilience. Their durability arose from a deep, sustained dialogue with local geology and chemistry. The recipe for success was not universal, it was hyper-local, born from intimate knowledge of a particular mountain's ash or a specific region's clay. This stands in stark contrast to our modern reliance on standardized, globalized building materials like Portland cement, which are produced identically across the world with immense energy cost and may not be ideally suited to every environment they are used in. The ancient engineer asked, "What does my land provide and how can I work with it?" We often ask, "How can I make this land accept what I have already decided to use?" Their legacy suggests that the longevity of any water system, any piece of infrastructure, is inextricably linked to how well its materials are married to the place it serves. It is a reminder that true sustainability might be found not in imposing a single solution everywhere, but in reviving that localized dialogue between human need and the specific, generous chemistry of the earth. That dialogue with local materials created the physical network, but the true genius was found in the human agreements that brought it to life. The most sophisticated canal is useless without the social code that decides who gets the water and when. Across the ancient world, communities developed intricate operating systems for their most vital resource, turning engineering into a living, breathing social contract. In the mountain villages of Oman, the lifeblood flowed from the Falaj, a Qanat channeling water from distant aquifers. Here, the village council did not just dig the tunnel, they wrote its laws. Water was allocated through a precise time share system, measured by the movement of a sundial's shadow across marked stones. A farmer might own the right to the full flow for 1 hour every 6 days, a schedule so sacred that tampering with it or stealing a neighbor's time was a grave offense, met with strict penalties. But this system also created a profound interdependence. Maintenance of the entire Falaj network, from the mother well to the distant fields, was a collective duty. Every member contributed labor for the annual cleaning, knowing that the health of the whole community depended on the care of each section. The physical phallage was the hardware, but this web of laws, schedules, and shared responsibility was the essential software that made it function for centuries. This concept of water as a legally defined public good reached a monumental scale in Rome. The Roman legal code contained the Lex Aquaria, a comprehensive set of laws governing everything from the right of way for aqueducts to severe penalties for polluting public water. A farmer could not simply tap the main channel for his field, and a landowner was obligated to allow access for repairs. The water commissioner, Frontinus, was as much a lawyer and administrator as he was an engineer, because managing the aqueducts meant managing the complex human behaviors around them. These legal frameworks were not afterthoughts, they were foundational, designed to prevent conflict and ensure that a resource meant for the city remained for the city. Perhaps no system better embodies this fusion of social and ecological harmony than the Subak of Bali. For over 1,000 years, the irrigation of Bali's stunning terraced rice fields has been managed not by a king or a central ministry, but by a democratic cooperative of farmers. Each Subak is a self-governing association of landowners who share water from a single source. They meet regularly in a temple to make decisions, voting on planting schedules, water allocation, and maintenance tasks for their canals and weirs. Their guiding philosophy, Trihita Karana, seeks harmony between the spiritual, the human, and the natural worlds. The water temple is the physical and spiritual heart of this system, where offerings are made to the goddess of water, Dewi Danu, not as superstition, but as a ritual affirmation of gratitude and responsibility. This elegant socio-hydraulic institution has been so successful at sustaining both productivity and community for a millennium that UNESCO has recognized it as a World Heritage Cultural Landscape. It proves that the most resilient management often emerges from the ground up, from the people whose survival is most directly tied to the resource. These ancient institutions achieved something we still struggle with. They embedded principles of equity, transparency, and sustainability directly into custom and law. They turned the abstract idea of shared resource management into a daily practice of meetings, measured time slots, and communal cleaning days. This social layer was the glue that held the physical system together through droughts, disputes, and generations of change, and its failure could be catastrophic. When the social compact breaks down, when laws are ignored or cooperative spirit frays, the physical infrastructure begins to decay. Canals silt up because no one organizes the dredging. Water is hoarded, leaving downstream fields to wither. The meticulous balance of a system like the Subak collapses under the pressure of top-down control or individual greed. The history of water is clear. Technical brilliance is ultimately futile without fair, adaptable, and resilient governance. The stones of an aqueduct may last for millennia, but the society that maintains it is far more fragile. This truth becomes painfully evident when these intricate human-machine partnerships face their ultimate test, not from social decay, but from a force beyond any ancient engineer's control, a changing sky. The Hohokam people of the American Southwest built the most extensive canal system in the prehistoric New World, a web of channels that turned the Sonoran Desert into a green oasis for over 1,000 years. Their society was a testament to hydrological mastery, perfectly calibrated to the rhythms of the region's seasonal floods. Yet by the middle of the 15th century, their great settlements were silent. The cause was not invasion or social revolt, but a changing sky. They faced a series of prolonged megadroughts, periods of aridity so severe and lasting that even their magnificent canals ran dry. The system, optimized for a specific climate pattern, had no backup plan when that pattern ceased to exist. Their story is a stark lesson in climate vulnerability. A system can be brilliantly engineered, yet remain tragically fragile if it is designed for a world that no longer exists. This pattern of climate stress testing ancient waterworks is a recurring theme. The decline of the classic Maya cities correlates powerfully with periods of intense drought that stretched over decades. Their sacred reservoirs, dependent on seasonal rainfall, slowly evaporated. The zeolite filters were useless without water to purify. The king's divine covenant to bring the rains was broken, unraveling the political and spiritual order that held the civilization together. Their system was deeply resilient within its normal range of variation, but it lacked the capacity to buffer against a climatic shift that pushed beyond those historical boundaries. Contrast this with the enduring Qanat. Its resilience lies partly in the source it taps. By drawing from deep, fossil aquifers fed by ancient rainfall and slow geological recharge, the Qanat was partially insulated from short-term droughts that would devastate a rain-fed reservoir. Its flow might diminish, but it rarely ceased entirely. This points to a fundamental principle of ancient hydraulic wisdom that we are now relearning. Diversification is the cornerstone of resilience. A civilization that relies on a single source, whether it is surface rivers, seasonal rains, or even a single massive aquifer, places all its bets on one card. When the climate deals a new hand, that civilization can find itself with nothing. These historical collapses are not mere footnotes. They are profound case studies in human adaptation under extreme pressure. They reveal that the most dangerous vulnerability is not a lack of engineering skill, but a lack of flexibility. A system optimized for maximum efficiency in a stable climate can become a trap when conditions change. This forces us to ask a critical question: what is the safe failure mode of a water network? Does it fail catastrophically, leaving everyone with nothing at once, or does it fail gracefully, allowing for adaptation and retreat? The ancient evidence suggests that decentralized, diversified systems often fail more gracefully. The Qanat networks, managed by individual villages, could adjust locally. If one tunnel failed, others might persist. The Balinese Subak system, with its distributed decision-making, could adapt planting schedules and water-sharing agreements valley by valley. In contrast, the massive, centralized hydraulic states like Angkor or the Hohokam network presented a single point of failure. When the core logic of their system was challenged by a prolonged drought, the entire societal edifice was at risk. These stories echo with a pressing relevance. We are now entering our own period of profound climate uncertainty, where historical patterns are becoming unreliable guides. Our modern water systems, often vast and centralized, face similar stresses: prolonged droughts, intense flooding, and shifting precipitation patterns. The ancient world whispers a clear warning: resilience is not about building bigger walls or deeper wells alone. It is about building smarter networks with multiple, redundant sources, from rainwater harvesting and groundwater recharge to recycled wastewater. It is about decentralizing control to allow for local adaptation, and most importantly, it is about designing systems with humility, systems that can fail in parts without collapsing the whole. The silent canals of the Hohokam remind us that the ultimate test of any civilization's ingenuity is not how it thrives in abundance, but how it adapts when the abundance ends. This search for adaptable wisdom now leads us away from grand monuments to the smallest, most humble unit of water management ever devised. Beneath a quiet Italian vineyard, a ghost glides through the earth. An archaeologist walks the rows, not searching for pottery, but watching a screen that displays pulses of radar energy returning from the soil. The readout reveals a faint, straight line of disturbance, the buried signature of a Roman aqueduct channel, its course perfectly preserved under centuries of dirt and vines. This is the new face of discovery, where the lost science of ancient water is being recovered not only with trowels, but with technologies that see through time itself. In the jungles of Cambodia, airborne LiDAR acts like a magical eraser, stripping away the dense canopy with laser pulses to unveil the staggering, city-wide grid of Angkor's canals and reservoirs, a hydraulic metropolis invisible from the ground. From the orbit of satellites, multispectral sensors detect subtle variations in soil moisture and plant health, tracing the pale, dry ghosts of Mesopotamian irrigation channels that vanished millennia ago. Each of these tools provides a new layer to the map, allowing researchers to understand the scale and interconnection of systems that were once only fragmentary puzzles. The detective work continues at the microscopic level. In the sediments at the bottom of a Maya reservoir, scientists can read a chemical diary of the past. Layers rich in certain isotopes can indicate periods of severe drought, while traces of algae or pollutants speak to the changing quality of the water and the challenges the city faced. It is environmental forensics, turning mud into a narrative of survival and stress. But perhaps the most revealing step is when researchers move from observation to reconstruction. To test the theory of the Nazca puquios, engineers have built physical models of the spiral wind vents and underground galleries. By simulating the desert winds, they can measure the suction effect, proving whether this elegant design could actually pull groundwater to the surface through atmospheric pressure alone. These experiments transform speculation into demonstrated physics, revealing the sophisticated empirical knowledge behind the artistry. This interdisciplinary pursuit is answering a deeper question. We are moving beyond simply cataloging what was built to understanding how these systems functioned as living, integrated organisms. The findings are consistently surprising, often revealing efficiencies that rival or even surpass modern approaches in terms of sustainability. The gentle, gravity-fed Qanat, for instance, prevents aquifer depletion and saltwater intrusion in a way that high-speed electric pumps do not. The Roman use of constant, slight gradients in their aqueducts minimized sediment buildup and required no external energy, a masterpiece of passive design. The Balinese subac system achieves remarkably equitable water distribution and conflict resolution through democratic cooperation, a social technology we struggle to replicate. These are not primitive methods. They are highly advanced solutions perfectly adapted to their local ecological and social context. This process of reverse engineering antiquity forces a profound re-evaluation. For generations, the narrative of progress assumed newer was inherently better, that technology was a linear march toward greater complexity and control. But the ancient hydrological blueprint tells a different story. It suggests that advanced technology might be defined not by its complexity or energy consumption, but by its elegance, its durability, and its harmony with local systems. A 2,000-year-old Qanat that still flows today is, in a very real sense, more advanced than a modern well that depletes its source in a decade. A temple that is also a rainwater harvester and a community center represents an integration of function that our specialized, siloed modern infrastructure has largely forgotten. The recovery of this lost science is more than an academic exercise. It is a source of genuine inspiration, offering proven, time-tested alternatives for a world facing its own water crises. The past, it turns out, might just hold the blueprint for a more resilient future. That blueprint for a resilient future is already growing in forgotten fields. In the misty highlands of the Philippine Cordilleras, the Banor rice terraces are often called a stairway to the sky, but they are far more than a beautiful sculpture. They are a living, breathing hydrological computer engineered over 2,000 years ago. Each curved terrace acts as a miniature reservoir, catching and slowing the mountain rainfall. The water then percolates slowly downward, level by level, naturally irrigating the paddies below while preventing soil erosion on the steep slopes. This is not a system that fights gravity. It collaborates with it, using the land's own shape to distribute water with breathtaking efficiency. The terraces create their own microclimates, support a rich diversity of aquatic life, and are maintained by a communal spirit as intricate as the stone walls themselves. This is engineering that builds ecological wealth, turning a mountainside into a self-sustaining food web. Half a world away, in the vast lake basin that would become Mexico City, the Aztecs performed a similar feat of ecological alchemy. Confined to a swampy island, they faced a stark choice: drain their environment or learn to float within it. They chose the latter, inventing the Chinampa. These floating gardens were not boats, but long, rectangular plots of fertile land built up from the lakebed. By weaving layers of mud, vegetation, and reed mats, they created artificial islands anchored by willow trees. The canals between them served as constant irrigation channels, but their function ran deeper. The still water acted as a thermal mass, protecting crops from frost. Aquatic plants and fish in the canals provided nutrients and pest control, while the entire network functioned as a giant wetland filter, cleansing the lake water. The Chinampa was a closed-loop ecosystem, a symbiotic partnership between human cultivation and aquatic life that produced up to 7 harvests a year without ever depleting the soil. This was agriculture as a form of environmental enhancement, a system that made the landscape more biodiverse and productive than it had been before human intervention. This philosophy of integration reached a grand landscape scale in ancient Sri Lanka. Here, engineers developed the tank cascade system, a chain of interconnected reservoirs cleverly placed along the paths of seasonal rivers. The largest tank would catch the initial monsoon surge, then overflow through carefully designed outlets to fill a series of smaller tanks downstream. This cascade did more than store water for irrigation. It slowed floodwaters, allowing silt to settle and replenish the soil. It recharged the groundwater across a wide area, creating perennial springs. And the forests protected around each tank became vital habitats and windbreaks, stabilizing the entire watershed. The system viewed the valley as a single, integrated organism, with water as its circulating lifeblood. Each element, from the largest reservoir to the smallest forest grove, played a role in sustaining the whole. This is biomimicry in its purest form, long before the word entered our vocabulary. These ancient designers did not see themselves as separate from nature, imposing order upon a chaotic world. They saw themselves as participants within a complex, living system. Their goal was not total control, but skillful integration. They asked, how can we design our needs into the existing patterns of water flow, nutrient cycles, and plant growth? How can our presence make this place more fertile, more stable, more alive? This stands in profound contrast to the modern hydraulic paradigm, which often relies on separation and simplification. We build massive dams that block sediment and disrupt entire river ecosystems. We channelize streams into concrete ditches to move water away as fast as possible, sacrificing groundwater recharge and habitat. We farm with monocultures that depend on chemical inputs, divorcing food production from local nutrient cycles. The ancient approach suggests a different path, one where infrastructure is designed to provide multiple, overlapping benefits or ecosystem services. A wetland that treats wastewater, hosts wildlife, and buffers floods. A green roof that captures stormwater, cools a building, and creates habitat. These are not new ideas, they are very old ones rediscovered. The silent wisdom of the terraces and the Chinampas challenges us to listen to the landscape again, not as a problem to be solved, but as a partner in design. It asks if our future water security depends less on bigger pumps and harder concrete, and more on understanding the quiet, generative logic of a living earth. The landscape itself holds a memory far older than any stone canal. For over 60,000 years, the songlines of Australian Aboriginal communities have woven intricate maps of water into story and ceremony. A particular melody might trace the path to a hidden desert waterhole, its rhythm mimicking the shape of the surrounding dunes. The verses of a creation story can encode the location of a sacred spring, its narrative describing the specific plants and animals that signal its presence. This is a science of water written not in equations, but in the living fabric of culture, a profound and sustained observation passed from elder to child across hundreds of generations. Indigenous hydrology around the world is founded on a relational understanding where water is not a resource to be managed, but a relative to be known. A tracker reads the direction of bird flight at dusk or the subtle pattern of insect life, not as random events, but as clear indicators of subsurface moisture. The health of a certain tree species, the way its roots reach, tells a story about the depth and flow of an unseen aquifer. This knowledge encompasses vast cycles, recognizing patterns of drought and flood that unfold over centuries, far beyond the record of any written instrument. These oral traditions formed a living database and a dynamic maintenance manual for entire continents. The songs were the instructions, the stories were the maps, and the ceremonies were the annual audits that renewed the community's bond with its life source. The profound loss of such knowledge through the hardships of colonial history represents an incalculable impoverishment, not just of culture, but of a deep, place-based science that sustained life in some of the world's most challenging environments. This presents a critical question for our modern crisis. How can contemporary water management begin to listen to and integrate these fundamentally different ways of knowing? Recognizing this intellectual heritage is not merely an act of respect. It is a practical necessity for developing truly sustainable relationships with water. It moves us from a model of extraction to one of kinship, understanding that the health of the water is inseparable from the health of the land and the people who belong to it. This ancient relational wisdom was so vital that societies often formalized the bond between people and their water source in the most binding way imaginable, by giving the resource legal personhood. The precise geometry of a water channel was often a prayer made visible. For many ancient builders, the mathematics that governed a perfect arch or a harmonious musical scale were the same principles that ensured a steady, equitable flow of water. This was not a coincidence. They saw the cosmos as an ordered, mathematical creation, and to mirror that order in their engineering was to align human endeavor with divine law. Examine the floor plan of a Byzantine cathedral like Hagia Sophia, and you will find the recurring use of the golden ratio, a proportion where the whole is to the larger part as the larger part is to the smaller. This same exacting ratio appears in the cross-sections of Roman aqueduct channels and the slope calculations for Persian Qanats. The builders believed that water flowing through a channel shaped by sacred geometry would itself become more harmonious, more beneficial. This imposed a breathtaking standard of precision. A canal was not just dug, it was composed, its dimensions a careful equation balancing flow rate, sediment transport, and structural integrity, all expressed in a proportional language they considered universal. This fusion reached an artistic zenith in the Mughal gardens of India and Persia, like the Shalimar Bog in Kashmir. Here, water was the central protagonist in a living allegory. The garden is meticulously divided into 4 quadrants by 2 axial water channels, representing the 4 rivers of paradise described in Islamic tradition. Each channel is precisely proportioned, with fountains and cascades placed at mathematically determined intervals to create a perfect, soothing rhythm of sight and sound. The water does not rush, it unfolds, moving with a serene predictability that cools the air and calms the mind. This was utility elevated to spiritual experience. The mathematical consistency of the layout guaranteed an even, reliable distribution to every planted terrace, while the symbolic framework transformed the act of irrigation into a walk through a perfected, eternal landscape. The aesthetic beauty was not an added luxury. It was the direct and inevitable outcome of the system's mathematical and symbolic integrity. What happens when a society divorces this trinity of function, form, and meaning? When we prioritize pure utility and cost-cutting above all else, we often build infrastructure that works but does not uplift. A concrete drainage ditch moves water efficiently, but it offers no shade, fosters no life, and inspires no connection. It solves an immediate problem while potentially creating a longer-term one, a landscape of harsh utility that communities feel no urge to cherish or maintain. The ancient approach suggests that beauty and precision are not frivolous extras, they are components of resilience. A system built with proportional harmony and care is often built to last, its very elegance a testament to the value placed upon it. The sacred geometry imposed a discipline that prevented haphazard or short-sighted construction. It asked the engineer to think not just in terms of gallons per minute, but in terms of balance, legacy, and the human spirit's need for order and grace. This profound integration of math, mysticism, and utility created works that were functionally superb and spiritually resonant, a standard of holistic design that challenges the fragmented way we often approach our world today. It reveals that the most enduring solutions speak to more than just our physical needs. They also nourish our innate desire for harmony, connecting the flow of water to a deeper, more universal sense of flow. The flow of water is the most ancient and reliable measure of time itself. Stand before the ruins of the Tower of the Winds in the Roman Agora of Athens, and you are looking at a multi-purpose public utility of stunning ambition. This octagonal marble tower, built in the 1st century before the Common Era, was far more than a sundial. Inside, a steady stream from the city's aqueducts filled a reservoir that powered a complex hydraulic clock, driving mechanisms that displayed the hour, the direction of the 8 winds, and the movements of celestial bodies. Here, timekeeping, meteorology, and astronomy were unified by the relentless, predictable drip of communal water. This was not a private gadget, it was civic infrastructure, a clock tower that literally ran on the public supply, making the abstract concept of time a visible, flowing reality for every citizen. This fusion reveals a profound truth: to manage water is to master time. Across the ancient world, the clepsydra, or water clock, was the heartbeat of complex societies. In Babylonian courts, it measured the length of legal speeches to ensure fairness. In Chinese observatories, it tracked the passage of the night watches. But its most vital application was in the fields, where the equitable sharing of a scarce resource demanded impeccable, unquestionable timing. The water clock transformed irrigation from a source of conflict into a schedule. A farmer's right to the canal flow was not a vague promise. It was a precise interval measured by the steady draining or filling of a marked vessel. When your time was up, you closed your sluice gate and the flow moved to your neighbor's plot. This technology imposed a rigid, transparent order on a fluid resource, replacing arguments with arithmetic. It created a society governed by the clock long before mechanical timepieces. A society where your wealth and security were literally held in a vessel of dripping water. This temporal governance reached its most sophisticated form in places like Bali. The Subak system's famous democratic meetings are scheduled by a calendar that has nothing to do with modern efficiency. It is a complex, slow time woven from lunar cycles, temple ceremonies, and generations of observation about when the water is right, when the soil is ready, and when the gods are auspicious. Planting and watering do not follow a factory schedule, they follow a sacred and ecological rhythm. A farmer does not receive water because a clock says so, but because the community's shared temporal map, blessed at the water temple, indicates it is his turn within the grand seasonal cycle. This is cyclical time management, deeply attuned to natural pulses rather than human-imposed deadlines. It acknowledges that water has its own seasons, its own ebbs and flows, and that true sustainability means aligning human activity with that deeper tempo. Our modern relationship with time could not be more different. We live by linear, commodified time, seconds sliced into billable hours, water pumped on demand at the turn of a tap, a constant, pressurized now that ignores source and season. This mindset encourages us to see water as eternally available, a substance that should conform to our immediate needs, regardless of drought or downpour. We have divorced the act of use from the reality of renewal. The ancient systems whisper a corrective, effective resource management is not just about better pipes or bigger dams. It is about better timing. It is about recognizing that the most precious resource is often not the water in the canal, but the shared agreement about when it flows and the collective patience to wait for your turn within the natural cycle. Their legacy asks us, what would our cities look like if our water use was governed by a civic calendar attuned to the watershed's health, rather than by the constant, silent assumption of infinite availability? The calculus of time they perfected ensured these systems could support vast populations not through brute force, but through elegant, scheduled harmony. The silent, steady flow of water from a public fountain often masked a river of human effort. To stand before the immense West Barre at Angkor is to witness a hydrological marvel, but also to stand on an artifact of profound social exertion. Its 8-kilometer expanse was not carved by machines, but by generations of hands, likely tens of thousands of conscripted laborers fulfilling their duty to the God-King. This was the corvée system, a form of tax paid not in grain or coin, but in physical labor. For months each year, farmers would leave their fields to move mountains of earth, constructing the dams and spillways that would guarantee the city's survival. Their work was an act of devotion, a civic obligation, and an undeniable expression of state power over the individual. The Roman aqueducts tell a similar, layered story. While skilled engineers and paid artisans designed the arches and calculated the gradients, the brutal work of quarrying stone, digging trenches, and hauling materials often fell to enslaved populations and soldiers. The gleaming water flowing into the city carried with it the silent imprint of this immense, organized effort. The creation of these megaprojects was always a dual demonstration, a mastery over the chaotic forces of nature, and an equally potent display of control over human populations and resources. A king or emperor proved his legitimacy not only by providing water, but by proving he could command the labor to make it appear. This system could provide incredible public goods, baths, fountains, and food security, lifting the entire community. Yet its foundation was frequently built on inequality and coercion, a hidden cost embedded in the very stones of the conduit. The scale of ambition required a political economy capable of marshalling vast resources, often prioritizing monumental legacy over individual welfare. This inherent tension raises a difficult historical question. Did the very effort of building and then perpetually maintaining these colossal networks place an unsustainable strain on the societies that created them? The meticulous upkeep of Angkor's canals or the constant dredging of Roman aqueducts demanded a permanent, organized workforce. When political will weakened, when droughts strained agricultural output and reduced the labor surplus, or when social unrest challenged the authority that commanded the work, the system's maintenance could begin to falter. The infrastructure did not fail in a day. It faded as the intricate social contract that sustained it slowly unraveled. To acknowledge this complexity is to see these ancient wonders in full dimension. The lost science we are recovering includes not only the engineering of water flow, but the human engineering required to make it happen. It encompasses the administrative edicts, the labor logs, the systems of reward and punishment that turned human energy into hydrological power. This reality inevitably influenced how the water was used and perceived in daily life. The public fountain was a gift from the emperor, a reminder of his benevolence and his reach. The shared reservoir was a testament to the king's divine connection, but also to his ability to organize your labor. The water was free, yet it was never truly free. Understanding this duality does not diminish the technical achievement. It deepens our respect for the profound societal effort these projects represented. It reminds us that every large-scale system, ancient or modern, rests upon a foundation of choices about resources, labor, and equity. The silent stones of an aqueduct hold within them the echoes of both the engineer's calculation and the laborer's toil, a complete picture of what it truly took to bend a river to a city's will. That droplet of water, having traveled for miles by gravity alone, finally finds its purpose in the splash and murmur of a public fountain. In the heart of ancient Rome, this was the destination for most citizens, a place to fill jars, to wash, to meet and talk. But for a privileged few, the journey of that water did not end there. From the main aqueduct channel, a smaller lead or ceramic pipe, called a fistula, would branch off, carrying a private stream directly into a wealthy domus. This was a quiet revolution, the democratization of convenience, bringing the mountain spring into the very heart of domestic life. Inside those walls, water became a servant. It fed a small courtyard pool, filled a sunken bath in the private caldarium, and even supplied an early forerunner of the flush toilet, where a small channel of running water carried waste into the city's cloaca system. This was not just luxury, it was a profound transformation of daily experience, redefining hygiene, privacy, and the rhythm of the household itself. The engineering required was deceptively sophisticated. To maintain water pressure in these smaller pipes and prevent dangerous backflow or contamination, Roman plumbers used bronze stopcocks and designed systems with careful attention to gradient, ensuring waste moved away from living spaces. This domestic ambition was not born in Rome, however. Over 2,000 years earlier, in the meticulously planned city of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, a similar vision of civic hygiene was already in place. Nearly every one of its brick houses contained a dedicated bathing area with a watertight floor and a drain. These household drains connected to a city-wide network of covered sewers that ran beneath the streets, a system of astonishing foresight that managed waste on a municipal scale 4 millennia ago. The psychological and social impact of this infrastructure cannot be overstated. When water is no longer a distant chore carried in heavy jars from a communal well, time and energy are freed. The concept of personal cleanliness shifts from a periodic effort to a daily ritual, influencing health and social norms. The architecture of the home changes to accommodate these new flows, creating spaces for private bathing and sanitation that separated clean from unclean, refining ideas of domestic order and even intimacy. This ancient pursuit of convenience reveals the ultimate goal of all grand infrastructure: to improve the texture of individual life. It turns a public good into a personal sanctuary. Yet this achievement demanded constant vigilance. The same lead pipes that brought convenience could, over time, pose a silent risk, a trade-off between immediate utility and long-term well-being that ancient engineers were only beginning to comprehend. And the sophisticated sewers of Mohenjo-Daro depended entirely on a culture of maintenance and shared responsibility to prevent blockages and backflow, protecting the entire city from the very waste it produced. The lesson written in these ancient pipes is clear. The final test of any water system is not its scale or its monumentality, but its safe, reliable delivery into the hands and homes of the people it serves. This intimate connection between the Grand Canal and the household drain completes the hydrological cycle, reminding us that the most advanced civilization is one that cares for the individual droplet as much as it masters the river. The clean water flowing into a Maya home was a product of silent, elegant chemistry. Before entering the great reservoir, runoff from the temple plaza would first pass through a carefully laid bed, a mixture of crushed volcanic zeolite and clean sand. This was not a random choice. Zeolite is a mineral with a crystalline structure that acts like a molecular sieve, trapping bacteria, organic matter, and fine silt. The Maya, through generations of observation, had identified a material that purified their water through physical filtration and ion exchange, a process modern science confirms is highly effective. They achieved this without a single theory of germs, guided instead by the clear evidence that water passing through this specific stone emerged clearer, tasted better, and seemed to correlate with community health. This empirical science of purity was a global pursuit. Roman engineers integrated purification directly into their aqueduct infrastructure. Before the main flow entered the city, it would be channeled into large, calm basins called piscini limeri. Here, the water's velocity would drop, allowing heavier particles of sand and silt to gently settle to the bottom. The cleaner water from the top would then continue its journey. But they went further. They deliberately designed steps and cascades into their channels. As the water tumbled over these stone falls, it churned and mixed with air, a process we now call aeration. This oxygenated the water, improving its taste by releasing dissolved gases like hydrogen sulfide, which can give water a rotten egg odor. They observed that water which danced over rocks simply tasted fresher and was more pleasing to drink. Half a world away, the builders of ancient Sri Lanka's tank cascade system employed a living technology. They planted specific grasses and shrubs with dense, fibrous root systems along the banks and bunds of their reservoirs. As water seeped through these vegetated barriers, the root mats acted as a natural biofilter, trapping sediment and absorbing certain impurities, while the plants themselves stabilized the soil against erosion. Each of these methods shares a common origin, a deep, attentive reading of the landscape. Our ancestors noticed that water emerging from certain sandy soils was clearer. They saw that springs bubbling over gravel beds produced water that seemed invigorating. They learned that ponds where specific reeds grew remained free of foul smells. They connected, through relentless trial and error, the qualities of clean water, clarity, freshness, absence of odor, with the well-being of their people. This knowledge was written not in textbooks but in the design of their cities. It raises a pressing question for our own time. In our reliance on energy-intensive chemical treatments and complex mechanical filtration plants, what simple, passive wisdom have we left by the wayside? The ancient approach suggests that purification need not always be a high-tech, centralized process. It can be distributed, woven into the very fabric of the landscape. Modern ecological engineering is now returning to these very principles, constructing artificial wetlands that mimic natural processes to treat wastewater, using sand and reed beds to filter runoff. We are, in a sense, rediscovering and validating with instruments what ancient observers knew through centuries of careful watchfulness. That Maya zeolite filter was not primitive, it was precisely advanced for its context, a sustainable, zero-energy solution born from a profound partnership with local geology. This vast repository of empirical water science represents more than historical curiosity. It is a living library of sustainable technology, reminding us that sometimes the clearest path to purity is to follow the quiet logic of the earth itself. The gentle flow of a canal could also be the march of an army. Across the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, the rise of the Assyrian Empire was not just a story of chariots and conquest, but of water redirected on a colossal scale. When a new territory fell, the first act of imperial consolidation was often not the building of a fortress, but the digging of a canal. These were not subtle irrigation channels. They were monumental earthworks, projects of such staggering scale they bound subject populations to the imperial center through a dual chain of dependency and awe. To control the water was to control life itself, and the Assyrian kings understood this power with chilling clarity. The Jerwan Aqueduct, commissioned by King Sennacherib, stands as a perfect testament to this hydraulic imperialism. This wasn't a hidden piece of infrastructure. It was a roaring declaration carved in stone, an elevated channel that carried water across a valley to his new capital, Nineveh. An inscription on the aqueduct leaves no doubt about its purpose, proclaiming that Sennacherib, by his own intelligence and the might of his gods, had brought distant waters to the city's orchards. The message to conquered peoples was unambiguous. Your old local gods could not provide this. Your former rulers could not achieve this. Only the Assyrian king, with his divine mandate and overwhelming organizational power, could reshape the very geography for your benefit. Resistance was not just futile, it was irrational, for who would defy the hand that brought the water that filled your cup and watered your fields? This was infrastructure as a weapon of propaganda, more enduring than any battlefield victory. It created a tangible, daily dependency. The agricultural surplus that fed the empire's growth and paid its taxes now flowed through channels built by the emperor's command. Loyalty became intertwined with irrigation. A similar, though differently expressed, logic powered the expansion of the Inca Empire along the spine of the Andes. The Inca state's genius lay in its ability to integrate a dizzying array of ecosystems and ethnic groups into a single, cohesive unit. Central to this project was their mastery of hydraulic engineering. As they incorporated new regions, Inca engineers would often construct or expand existing canal systems, tying local agricultural production into the imperial economy. The ruler who could bring reliable water to high-altitude terraces or arid coastal valleys could command not just obedience but gratitude. He could demand labor for other state projects, and he could redistribute the resulting bounty to reinforce patronage and loyalty. The water itself became a thread in the quipu, the knotted cord that recorded everything from taxes to history, binding distant communities to the will of the Sapa Inca in Cusco. This darker current in the history of water engineering is inescapable. The same knowledge that could nurture a community could also subjugate it. The aqueduct that quenched a city's thirst also cemented its political submission. The canal that greened a desert also determined who ate and who did not. This forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. How does a simple ditch or a clay pipe transform into an instrument of raw political power? The answer lies in the conversion of a natural commons into an administered resource. When a state monopolizes the technical knowledge, the labor organization, and the legal right to distribute water, it holds the ultimate lever over survival and prosperity. The consequence for equitable access is often stark. Water follows power. It flows first to the royal gardens, the capital city, and the estates of the elite. The needs of marginalized communities or distant provinces can become secondary to the geopolitical or economic ambitions of the center. This historical pattern is not a relic. It echoes in the modern geopolitics of river basins, where upstream dams in one nation can become instruments of pressure on downstream neighbors. It resonates in the social displacements often caused by large-scale dam projects, where the promise of regional progress can overlook the profound disruption to local lives and ecosystems. Understanding this long history of hydraulic control is crucial. It reminds us that a dam, a canal, or a water treaty is never a neutral piece of engineering. It is always, at some level, a political document, a statement about who has the right to shape the landscape and for whose benefit. The silent flow of water carries within it the enduring currents of power, dependency, and the eternal human struggle to balance control with equity. A Roman emperor could command water to dance. At his sprawling villa in Tivoli, Hadrian did not merely store or channel water, he composed with it. Engineers carved channels through the hills to feed a landscape of liquid theater, where hidden pipes made water gush from statues, whisper into serene reflecting pools, and cascade over artificial grottos dedicated to water nymphs. This was not irrigation, it was orchestration, a symphony of visual and auditory effects designed to delight the senses and soothe the mind. The value of water here transcended the utilitarian, reaching into the realms of psychological nourishment and spiritual reflection. To stroll through such a space was to experience water not as a commodity, but as a living element of art and atmosphere. This pursuit of aesthetic mastery was a global philosophy. In the heart of the Persian Empire, the concept of the Paradise Garden, or Paradisa, was born. These walled enclaves were meticulously divided by 4 water channels, representing the rivers of paradise described in sacred texts. The water flowed with a gentle, predictable murmur, cooling the air and feeding lush plantings of fragrant flowers and fruit trees. The garden was designed as a physical manifestation of eternal life, tranquility, and order, a perfect microcosm of a harmonious universe. It was a place for poetry, conversation, and quiet connection with the divine, all centered around the calming presence of flowing water. To create this seemingly effortless beauty required hydraulic control of the highest order. The gentle gradient of a Persian water channel, the precise pressure needed to make a fountain jet arc just so, the hidden network that fed a dozen different displays without a single leak, all this demanded engineering as precise as any aqueduct. The goal was different, however. It was to mask the machinery, to make the water appear as a spontaneous gift of nature, even as every drop followed a meticulously planned path. This integration of beauty and function elevated water management from a mere craft to a profound art. It was an art that required a deep, intuitive understanding of water's fundamental properties, its reflectivity, its sound, its cooling effect, and its mesmerizing movement. These aesthetic applications were never frivolous luxuries. They served essential human needs that pure utility ignores. The Fountain Plaza in a Roman city was a social hub, a place to meet and talk amidst the spray. The shaded garden pool offered a refuge for contemplation, a space where the mind could rest alongside the water. The Nymphaeum provided a cool, grotto-like sanctuary that felt connected to ancient, elemental forces. Water's beauty had a purpose: to nourish the human spirit, to create community, and to frame moments of peace in often chaotic lives. This historical reality poses a quiet challenge to our modern relationship with water. In an age of purely functional piping, where water is often invisible until it emerges from a tap or disappears down a drain, what have we lost by divorcing it from aesthetic experience? Our treatment plants and reservoirs are marvels of efficiency, but they are rarely places of beauty or public gathering. We have gained incredible convenience, but we may have surrendered something vital: the daily, sensory reminder of water's grace and its power to shape not just landscapes, but moods and moments. The silent, chlorinated stream from a faucet gets the job done, but it tells no stories, creates no community, and inspires no poetry. The ancient world suggests that when we make water beautiful, we are more likely to remember its true worth. This philosophy of leisure and beauty represents the ultimate confidence in a water system, the belief that once survival is assured, the next imperative is to use that same water to elevate what it means to be alive. The Roman engineer's wooden form was a question posed to gravity itself. His hand, adjusting the slope by a fraction of a degree, was guided by a library of unwritten data, a deep empirical understanding of how water moves, fights, and surrenders. He had no textbook of fluid dynamics, no equations for turbulence or laminar flow. Instead, he had generations of watching. He knew that water in a smooth, slightly sloping channel would maintain a steady, self-cleaning pace. He understood that a sudden drop, a stepped cascade, was not a flaw but a tool, a way to bleed off destructive energy before it could erode the channel walls. This was physics learned by feel and by failure, a robust science built from the ground up, one carefully observed result at a time. Their mastery extended into the invisible realm of pressure. When an aqueduct needed to cross a deep valley, Roman engineers employed a breathtakingly bold solution, the inverted siphon. They would run a sealed lead pipe down one side of the valley, across the bottom, and back up the other side. To make this work, they had to grasp a fundamental principle: water under pressure behaves with immense force. They knew that the pipe at the very bottom of the valley, bearing the weight of the entire water column above it, had to be massively reinforced with stone piers and thicker metal. They were intuitively managing hydraulic head, the very concept that would later be formalized by scientists like Evangelista Torricelli, centuries after the empire had fallen. This was not guesswork. It was a repeatable, reliable technology born from meticulous observation and incremental refinement. This same empirical genius flourished an ocean away in the earthquake-shaken Andes. The Inca built their stone-lined canals not just to carry water, but to survive the land's violent tremors. Their construction technique reveals a profound understanding of material response. Instead of rigid, mortared joints that would shatter under seismic stress, they used precisely fitted stones that could shift and settle without breaking apart, allowing the canal to flex with the earth. They often lined channels with clay to reduce leakage, but they chose their materials and layouts based on centuries of seeing what worked and what crumbled when the ground shook. Their canals were dialogues with geology, each curve and joint a learned response to the forces of their specific world. This process of discovery stands in quiet contrast to modern theoretical engineering. Today, we often begin with universal principles, mathematical models that describe ideal behavior under controlled conditions. We simulate flows on computers before a single stone is laid. This approach is powerful, allowing us to design for scenarios we have never physically witnessed. But the ancient path was different. It was deeply inductive, moving from countless specific observations toward general rules. Their laboratory was the landscape itself, and their experiments unfolded over generations. A canal that silted up too quickly taught a lesson about gradient. A pipe that burst at the valley's base taught a lesson about pressure. Each failure was a data point, each success a refined technique passed to the next apprentice. This hands-on, iterative learning created a form of intelligence that is extraordinarily difficult to codify in a manual. It was a place-based wisdom, a fluency in the unique language of a local environment, its soils, its rainfall patterns, its seismic rhythms. The Roman engineer knew the specific behavior of the water from the Alban Hills. The Inca canal builder understood the particular way tremors traveled through the valley's granite. This hyper-localized knowledge is why these systems were so exquisitely tuned, so resilient within their original context. They were not generic solutions imposed from afar. They were conversations, long and patient, between a culture and its source of life. This suggests that our most resilient future may not come from universal models alone, but from reviving that essential dialogue, pairing our powerful theories with the slow, attentive art of listening to a place and learning from its ancient, flowing answers. The silent, flowing water in a Roman aqueduct obeyed a single, distant authority. Its path was decreed by imperial engineers, its maintenance funded by state coffers, and its disruption a crime against the empire itself. This was water governance as a top-down command, a model of breathtaking scale that could quench a metropolis of 1 million souls, yet its strength was also its fragility. When the central administration in Rome began to fray, the knowledge and will to maintain those precise gradients slowly evaporated. The aqueducts did not shatter, they silted up, their flow diminishing as the centralized intelligence that created them receded into history. Contrast this with the gentle murmur of a katara beneath the Moroccan sun. Here, the water's journey is governed not by an emperor, but by a covenant. Each farmer's share is measured not in volume, but in time, dictated by a centuries-old custom where a family might own the right to the full flow for one specific hour each week. The maintenance of the entire underground tunnel, from the mother well to the distant fields, is a collective duty. Every user knows that if their section collapses, the lifeblood of the entire community stops. This is a bottom-up contract written in shared labor and mutual dependence. The lost science of water, therefore, encompasses far more than gradient and geology. At its heart lies a more profound question: who decides? The centralized model, as seen in Rome, Angkor, or Assyria, could mobilize immense resources for monumental projects. It could deliver urban luxury, public health, and the water needed to support dense populations. But this model tied the system's survival directly to the stability of a political center. When that center weakened, the system often began a slow, irreversible decline. The knowledge was held by a specialized elite, and the labor was an obligation, not a personal investment. Decentralized models like the Subak of Bali or the Acequias brought from Spain to the American Southwest operated on a different logic. Here, the users are the managers. They meet in council to allocate water, resolve disputes, and organize the cleaning of canals. Your right to water is inseparable from your responsibility to maintain the channel that brings it. This embeds a conservation ethic directly into daily practice. You are far less likely to waste a resource you must personally help sustain. These community-based systems often prove remarkably adaptable and durable, able to adjust local rules in response to a dry year or a new farmer, because the decision-makers are the ones most directly affected by the consequences. So which model stands stronger against the shocks of time? A sudden drought or a change in leadership? History suggests a compelling answer. The most resilient systems may be neither purely top-down nor entirely bottom-up, but a thoughtful hybrid. Imagine a framework where a larger authority, perhaps a regional water council, ensures equity between basins and resolves major conflicts, while the day-to-day management, the allocation of turns, and the clearing of ditches remains firmly in the hands of the local community that depends on it. This nested approach combines the protective scale of a larger entity with the adaptive intelligence and personal stake of local users. It is an insight that resonates powerfully in our own era, as debates rage over water privatization, community rights, and how to manage scarce resources in a changing climate. The ancient world quietly argues that the most sustainable governance may be the one that keeps the decision as close to the water and to the people who drink it as possible. The wisdom of ancient canals is no longer confined to ruins. In the sun-scorched state of Rajasthan, India, a remarkable transformation is underway. Communities, aided by local organizations, are not digging new wells but restoring old ones. They are clearing centuries of silt from the steppes of forgotten baolis, the magnificent stepwells that once sustained their ancestors. This is not an archaeological hobby. It is a direct response to a modern crisis of vanishing groundwater. As modern tube wells drain aquifers faster than the rains can replenish them, these ancient structures offer a different logic. When the monsoon arrives, the wide, stepped catchment of a revived stepwell captures runoff that would otherwise be lost, funneling it deep underground to recharge the very water table the community depends on. It is a slow, patient, and profoundly effective form of water banking, a technology that works with the seasonal rhythm rather than fighting against it. Across the ocean, in the modern city of Lima, Peru, planners face a paradox. This coastal metropolis receives almost no rainfall, yet it is plagued by destructive floods when rare downpours hit the surrounding hills. The solution they are now implementing draws directly from the landscape intelligence of the Inca. Instead of relying solely on concrete culverts to rush stormwater out to sea, they are building amunas, ancient-inspired infiltration systems that mimic natural waterways. These are pre-Inca canals recently rediscovered that capture floodwaters and redirect them into the ground, replenishing springs and aquifers for the dry season. This green infrastructure turns a destructive event into a resource, echoing the Inca principle of collaborating with the land's natural hydrology. This global revival is driven by a quiet revolution in engineering thinking. Specialists in arid regions are now modeling new irrigation projects on the Qanat's gentle physics. They see its genius, a tunnel that taps just the top of an aquifer, allowing gravity to provide a steady, sustainable flow that prevents the saltwater intrusion and rapid depletion caused by powerful electric pumps. In water-starved areas, this ancient passive technology is being reimagined for modern farms, offering a blueprint for drought resilience that consumes zero energy. Similarly, the concept of the sponge city, now a cornerstone of urban planning from China to Europe, feels like a direct descendant of Maya and Khmer hydrology. The goal is no longer to get rid of rainwater as fast as possible. It is to absorb it, to slow it down, to let the city itself act like a giant reservoir. This means creating parks that double as retention basins, installing permeable pavements that allow water to seep into the soil, and restoring urban wetlands. It is the same principle that guided the builders of Angkor's barrays and Tikal's temple cisterns, to catch the deluge and use it to weather the drought. This movement is far more than nostalgic imitation. It is a pragmatic recognition that these time-tested systems often achieve a superior kind of efficiency. Their elegance lies in using free forces, gravity, evaporation, soil filtration, and plant transpiration to do work that our modern systems accomplish with vast amounts of energy and complex machinery. A Qanat needs no fuel, a stepwell requires no pump, a Chinampas-style wetland treats wastewater without a chemical plant. They are inherently ecological, designed to enhance biodiversity and soil health as they manage water. The critical question for our century is not whether to use ancient techniques, but how to thoughtfully blend this recovered wisdom with our modern materials and scientific understanding. Can we combine the Qanat's passive gradient with durable modern liners to reduce seepage? Can we integrate the Subak's democratic water sharing model with digital sensors for precise allocation? Can we build a new city block that functions with the hydrological intelligence of a Maya temple complex, using smart materials and green roofs to capture, clean, and recycle every drop of rain? This hopeful synthesis is already taking shape. It represents a profound shift from seeing the past as a series of dead ends to viewing it as a living library of sustainable innovation. These are not primitive answers, but sophisticated solutions born from deep, long-term observation. Their revival proves that the most urgent answers to our environmental crises may not always lie ahead in some undiscovered technology, but are sometimes waiting patiently in the landscape, etched in stone and memory, ready to guide us toward a more resilient balance. The final lesson from these silent aqueducts and buried channels is not a set of blueprints, but a shift in perspective. From the whispering galleries of Persian Qanats to the monumental tanks of Angkor, the lost science of water reveals a universal truth. The most advanced civilizations were not necessarily those that conquered nature with the greatest force, but those that learned to listen to it, to partner with its fundamental logic. Our journey has moved through stone and law, through the mathematics of flow and the covenants of shared time. We have seen how these systems supported millions by weaving together engineering, ecology, and a profound sense of the sacred. The key takeaway for us today is not that we must copy the exact technology, but that we must recover the underlying philosophy. This is a philosophy of sustainability rooted in deep local knowledge of infrastructure that serves both community and cosmos, and of a vision measured not in quarterly reports but in generations. It is the understanding that a water system is ultimately a dialogue, a long conversation between a culture and the source of its life. As we face our own era of deepening scarcity and climatic disruption, these ancient blueprints offer far more than historical curiosity. They offer a compass. They demonstrate that resilience is possible, that societies have thrived under conditions we would consider impossible, not by fighting their environment, but by designing themselves within its rhythms. This exploration can be a call to look at our own landscapes with new eyes, to see a river not just as a source to be tapped, but as a living system with its own needs. To see a city not just as a consumer of water, but as a potential catchment, a sponge that can nurture itself. The goal is to see water not as a problem to be solved with ever bigger pumps and longer pipelines, but as a partner in building a durable, beautiful, and equitable future. The quiet intelligence of the past flows into the present, waiting to be heard. If this journey into forgotten sciences has illuminated new paths forward, consider subscribing for more explorations into how history's deepest wisdom can guide our tomorrow. And we would love to hear which of these ancient water systems do you find most inspiring for the world we must build now. Share your thoughts below.